My name's Mikey. This is Talkaoke. It's very simple, free-form talk show. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. You've kind of got it by now, I'm sure. I'm just going to put this on and I'm going to get everyone else's names. Come and join in. Yes, that's you. Okay, it's not as good as this talk here. We can tell you that now. Okay, right. I say that, but now we've got to live up to this. 25 minutes anyway, so what's the deal? Okay, right, why are they rushing? Okay, so, let's get some names. What's your name?
Peter.
Peter, come in a little bit so everyone's a bit far from my shorter.
Jasmine.
François.
Catherine.
And
Helena.
Helena.
Margot.
Emmett.
Okay, so you've obviously had a lot to drink tonight, Margot, so, but, that's good. It is Friday night, yeah?
I'm trying to say that this is my drink. I'm drinking water. I've stopped drinking alcohol temporarily because it's just doing my head in.
Okay, and you drink
This
from
is-
a reusable container as well?
Yeah, but I've noticed there are like little growths inside of my thing. I mean, I don't put anything other than water in it, so it's very bizarre. What is this little growth? But maybe I should give it a scrub.
Some biologists around the table can tell us what those growths are. Are they harmful? You're not a biologist, okay? Any biologists around the table? Any biologists in the building? We need a biologist. Are you a biologist? Come and sit down. We need you. Come and sit. This is Talkaoke pop-up talk show. Pop-up talk show. At the moment, we're talking about just how sustainable are you? Do you have a reusable water container like Margot, or are you more like Emmett, that's just like like blasting it with his Volvic?
Yeah, this is a reused bottle actually. It's just that my normal bottle I use, it doesn't have a seal on it, so I was reluctant to put it in my bag in case it spilled. I normally keep it in the side pocket where it stays the right way up. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is earlier on the radio, I think they were talking about the 4 most important things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, and they were talking about things like having a renewable energy tariff, using public transport. They didn't really suggest walking for some reason. I mean, or cycling. But using public transport or things for getting about rather than a private car. But the one thing they completely missed out on, and it's always the first one you see when it's reduce, reuse, recycle, it's the first one that's always reduce. And it's a bit like we were saying earlier about the fast fashion and things. So much of our consumption now, we've been programmed to do it from advertising and everything. And it's completely unnecessary. It's like if you had to make things yourself, would you really do that? And it's just because the cost, we do not have the full cost of things in the price of them. You can buy things so cheaply now, made in, and funny now with the coronavirus, we might not get stuff from China. We rely on China basically producing so much stuff all the time that we can, well, without that we don't have economic growth and our whole system comes to a halt, which is probably what's going to happen this year with the COVID-19.
Okay, so we got to consume less, basically, is the message I'm getting from you, Emmett. There's a point over here, anything on this side of the table? Is it just kind of like, capitalism and environmentalism is now kind of clashing, they're coming up against each other? What do you think on this side, anything? Are you a consumerist or an environmentalist or both?
Well, I think you can maybe both. You can maybe consume in a green way.
Right.
I don't think you have to. I mean, you can choose what you consume, and you can make it in the most reliable way. I think like not consuming anything will probably, I don't know, not give up on some stuff, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe we're getting pushed at consuming way too much of what we need. But I think we can still we don't have to reduce our way of living to bare minimum if we're just a bit more careful.
So it doesn't all need to be homemade hummus grown in our backyard. It could, yeah.
But I think there are certain philosophies that they're all about, and even religion to some extent, they're about kind of inner discipline. And I think, a lot of people are like, religion, whatever, no one cares. But actually what that teaches you is, just be moderate in your consumption, actually.
Right. So
For instance,
the answer,
yeah, I think so, because in a way, fasting, for instance, is like, it's a religious thing, and now people do it as a detox. I'm like, it's there is a use for it broader than maybe people may think.
Okay, so where do people stand on this? Can you have consumerism and environmentalism in the same body? Francois says yes.
I think no. I think I get like a lot of greenwashing going on, where like I'm told to buy like this product, but it doesn't. I'm just like I don't need another like Tupperware box, or like I'm being told to buy like a bamboo lunchbox, but actually I've got loads of just Tupperwares from the takeaway. I should just keep using those instead.
Right.
But like it doesn't look as good if I bring them into work. People are going to judge me. So
you'd rather
I should buy the bamboo box.
Okay, sounds quite cool. I can see where you're coming from. But I don't think here on panel would be I can't hear what you're saying from over there. If you want to say something, come down here. So, what do we think? Are we being encouraged to buy a bamboo box when
If you buy a bamboo box, then you need to bin all your Tupperware you already have. Don't you create landfill to try the solution? Yeah.
Okay. You're nodding as well. Do you agree on this?
I don't have anything to say at the moment. I'm just
Are you a
listening.
consumerist or a capitalist?
Both, I think.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Are you consumerist or environmentalist? So that's completely wrong. Consumerist, environmentalist, both, neither. Come and have a seat on the table of chat. We've got Emmett, we've got Margot, we have got Helena. What's the name again, sorry?
Catherine.
Catherine, and Bartois, and what's it again?
Jasmine.
And
Peter.
Peter, come and have a seat. What's your name?
Anna.
And
Enrico.
somehow today's Talkaoke has been all about how to be a better sort of person to the environment, how to have less of a carbon footprint, less of a impact on the planet. We're just stuck on this subject, but we've come up with so many different ways of doing it. At the moment, Emmett's suggesting just consumerism that is actually driving us. Give us a final thought before we go. Francois.
Well, go green stuff. I think the planet needs it, so let's consume a bit less.
Consume a bit less.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got another couple of new faces here. What's your name?
Carlo.
Anna Maria.
Come in a bit closer, a bit far away there. But.
Thank you.
So we're talking about really what we can do to reduce our, is it just about consuming less? Are we being kind of bamboozled into buying a bamboo lunchbox when we could just use the old takeaway box that we had from yesterday? These are some of the questions. Are there any other things? Helena, have you got any views on this?
Well, I mean, the stuff that I work in, a lot of this issue about consumerism and stuff, I think traveling is a big issue as well, because a lot of the stuff I have to do for work means that I have to take really long plane journeys, and I often think that that might be something that would cut down on, but then also makes it a bit more difficult to kind of do work if you're not then allowed to travel.
What kind of plane journeys do you take?
Well, I'm going to Texas in March,
Right. Why?
so because I'm going to a NASA conference.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah. And what is the conference on?
It's called the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference. So I'm going and I'm going to be talking about space, basically.
So you're going to be talking about space.
Yes.
And you're going to take a flight there.
I'm going to take. Well, I mean, you always worry a little bit. Like I went to America 3 times last year for work, and I'm just like, well, actually, is that sustainable of me? And I just don't think it is.
Can you do it in a different way? Could you all meet in space, maybe? Would that be even worse?
What, go up into space?
Yeah, meet a bit.
Can you think about it? Like if a plane journey uses up fuel, imagine how much fuel. Yeah, it's true. But it is a difficult one because, like, how do you operate in today's world without travel for work? Often without traveling, and traveling is such a big part of and people often say, okay, well, I will do Skype stuff and like Skype meetings and just talk to people online and things. But I just think that in some cases that's not possible. So I don't know, it's a difficult one.
Okay, so we're talking about could actually all of this academic stuff, all these conferences ends up like really eating up the air miles.
Yeah.
And is it really necessary? Is it kind of one of those things where you're finding out the answer to save the planet by having the planes? We've got new faces there. What's your name?
Andrea.
Andrea.
Andra.
Yeah. Was that a point, or was it just
No, it was a point, and then I was waving, and I'm back to making a point. The point I was going to make about flying and the distances. I recently been to a show which was by a Canadian artist, but she wasn't there. She created the show, which was it was loosely about climate and weather, but she wasn't there. She was there as a hologram or something. So they would take a performer from wherever the show is performed, and they will step in and they'll follow instructions, which in a way, it's kind of like ethically speaking, it's a very good idea, but practically speaking, if I were to get inspired by, art and creativity or different culture, for instance, or an issue, then I would prefer it to be, real life, really visceral.
If we have to make these sacrifices, could it be a hologram that goes to the conference?
But then again, how much does all of that really impact the environment? Because if you think about that, the biggest polluters are oil companies, for instance.
Right.
So if they started changing, so whatever we do is so little when you think about that.
We shouldn't be worrying too much
that
about us and worrying more
we
about the oil.
should, of course, but we should worry more maybe about huge polluters, huge oil companies, and how we can transform that. How can we fund science that will make clean energy, for instance? Maybe that should be the big focus here. Because if you travel less, it's not like we travel, like, I don't know, 1 million times a year and like transcontinental.
To America 3 times.
Okay, last year. But just 3. It's not that much.
What do we think? Is it
But that's
about?
part of our job, right?
Yeah,
That's part of the job. I know. I mean, I'm a scientist too, so that's how it works.
Scientists fly so much.
Because you need to talk to each other. We need to talk with.
As a hologram?
It doesn't work. I mean, in my case, it's physics. I need a backboard. I cannot talk to people without a blackboard. We don't understand each other. So there is a problem of communication.
It's better in person, communicating in actual person rather than being somewhere completely far away.
Physicists need a blackboard. They need the feel of the
Yeah, precisely.
It's noise that it makes.
Otherwise, communication fails.
So why don't we just set up a big railgun, put someone into a pod, intercontinental ballistic style, then it can glide down to Houston or wherever it needs to be, and you don't need to bring loads of bags and stuff with you, and then you'll get there for your conference, railgun there, fire you back to Europe. Well, I'm just saying that the thing is, at the moment, people complain about the oil companies, but we're basically allowing them to run the show. Every time when you choose to get in a flight, every time you choose to fill up your car, you're giving more energy to those oil companies. Well, personally, I think I last flew in 2012 from Ireland to Poland, and normally I get train or I cycle, or that year when I didn't get flight back because I cycled back from Slovakia via Hungary and back to Holland and then got a ferry to Britain. So there's different ways to do it. Not everyone can do that. Some people have got impairments and things, are not able to cycle, but.
Oh, I was just going to say, I always think that's great, and I want to do that, but I've got 20 days of holiday a year, and and then I can only take them, at certain times.
Ever take a holiday as a hologram, where you actually go
Oh.
and send your holograms to the beach?
Can I still feel things? No. Okay, we've got some no's over here. I think it's probably like. I feel like the holiday's got like a sensory element to it that I'd need to experience. So maybe I just have to go to Cornwall. I don't know. Do that more.
You'll have people who go on the holiday anyway and therefore take that plane. So let's say only one person's on that plane's still flying off. So what is the point of you not going and being a hologram when you can just go on the plane even if it's taking off already?
Okay, so you think the planes are already taken, the tickets have already almost been put out there, whether they get bought or not, doesn't really matter. That plane is already going to Alicante.
It's not like a private jet.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, if you only have a limited number of days in a year to take your holidays, you really don't want to be, spending like half of it on traveling and traveling back. And I think there has to be some kind of adjustments in how we think about productivity and working hours, and
So you think we've got to be less productive, basically.
we have to be. I think we will be more productive if we take more time off. Like my boss today said to me, it's like, oh, you have to take all your holiday before the end of March. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. She said, but I prefer you to do that because obviously it's very good for you. But equally, the number of projects that the volume of projects is like, are you fucking kidding me? So something's going to have to give. But it's just like I feel like the will is there, but practically what that means, I don't think employers are fully like on the same page.
Okay, so, do we need to sort of change our culture, our employment culture, our holiday culture, a conference culture, in order to kind of,
So I just want to say, like, I think this issue with the plane travel and stuff, while it is a problem at the moment, I think actually it's one of the areas that there is a lot of research going into improving the sustainability of planes and things. There is a huge amount of research. It's one of the biggest, like, because it's funded by the airline companies themselves, and that they are taking it seriously. So I think it's actually something that we, like, in the short term, maybe we do have to change our attitude towards flying and things like that. But I think in the long term, I think they will come up with real solutions to actually doing it in a more sustainable way, which is really, really good. So
you're saying faith in the
yeah, faith in the airline companies,
technology?
faith in
Do
science.
we all agree that science will solve the problems here if we just allow it to? Will science solve our world problems? That's what we're talking about here. Andrew, have you got any views on this? Do you think science will solve?
I think it's always a cost-benefit exercise that you need to take, and yeah, as you said, like, you need to look at the long term versus the short term. If in the short term it would impact us more to not fly to different places, then I don't think that would benefit the long term.
I mean,
So
that's the thing. What Emmett was saying earlier on is if you actually factored in the costs of producing stuff, it would be much, much more expensive. If you factored in the costs of how to dispose of it and all these things. But I mean,
yeah,
is that the way?
and the benefits of having a whiteboard or a blackboard and being able to talk more efficiently to people, or also reaching out to people and inspiring other people. If it's better for you to be in a certain place, then I think that's a benefit, and it's hard to quantify that, right?
Yeah, it's not the people, the power of people. It's hard to quantify that. Was there a point over here?
And I think we need to also think about other countries, because these discussions about people who can actually fly and who can travel, and most of the world's still trying to get there. So how do we deal with that? So how does this technology help this kind of people to have, what's the optimal point basically, that's comfortable and everyone can live a comfortable life, but that's sustainable at the same time?
Are you saying all those people from developing countries should be able to fly as well?
No, not to fly, but to have a comfortable life and to have to buy, and because we're talking about productivity as well. So most countries haven't even reached that level yet.
Right, okay,
So
so we've got to
yeah,
get there
when you
before-
tell people, okay, you shouldn't buy and you shouldn't fly, and they're like, but I haven't been able to do that yet. So how do we deal with that too?
Yeah, so, Andrew, give me a final thought before you go. You think you can just sneak up? But I'm like a spider. I've got eyes in the back of my head.
Well, a final thought on
Final
what?
thought. I mean, how are we going to save this planet? Does it need saving?
I think we're looking at one thing, which is flying at the moment, and it's quite.
Why do you think there's so much attention on flying?
I don't know. There's a lot of like cars, transportation in general. A lot of people have cars. It's only recently that more people have electric cars or just half hybrid cars, for instance. So I think there's a lot of other things that we need to look at and not just focus on the flying.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so we need to be a bit more holistic here and not just think about flying.
I have a point about electric cars, just to say, how do you think they make the electric cars? They don't. And how do you think they make the electricity that they use to drive the electric cars? I mean, that's exactly right.
Recently, I read an article about a battery that is created from viruses, which isn't sustainable at the moment to be mass-produced, but that would be.
Created from viruses.
Yes, yeah, and they're genetically modified. Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. I didn't realize, but there was this scientist in 2009, I think. Yeah, she presented it to Barack Obama. Yeah, but they're still trying to figure out how to mass produce as an alternative to the current battery. Yeah.
Okay, so a bio battery made out of viruses. Sounds, yeah. I mean, I'm wow. Do you know about this? You're not a biologist.
Not a biologist.
Come and have a seat on the table of chat. We're talking about really how to save the planet, whether it actually needs saving. Why are we so concerned about flying as opposed to all these other things going on in the world? Sorry?
I think it's because I brought it up, so I'm sorry about that.
Because I think we're just all jealous of Helena going to America so many times.
Yeah, we've already seen the first coup, fascist coup sponsored by the Americans in Bolivia, overthrowing indigenous elected president because of the lithium reserves, 25% of the world's lithium reserves in Bolivia. But flying, I think the thing is, flying is often seen as a luxury and not essential. Whereas people often think, oh, eating beef, that must be essential. And apparently, bigger source of carbon dioxide, not carbon dioxide, sorry, of global warming, because it's methane, half-life of 25 years, but in that time it's got 25 times the heating amount, the same amount of carbon dioxide. But it's cows farting. But the thing is, it doesn't even mean you have to stop eating beef. They've worked in Ireland, since we're the only place that's actually interested in it, because beef is probably such a big part of the economy. If you feed them 5% of their diet seaweed, then they don't fart. And it just have the different chemical process in their stomach. And but the technological situations might not all be necessarily involving very high-tech things that cost billions of dollars. It might just be some smart people doing some experiments, often teenagers, to be honest. And in Ireland, there was again a teenager who isolated a completely new antibiotic, the first new antibiotic for 20 or 30 years. And we just need to empower our teenagers more. I think we've seen that with Malala Yousafzai, with Greta Thunberg.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a few questions there. There's the thing. I mean, it comes back to this point as well about innovation. Is innovation the way to save the planet? And are we fostering the innovations of the battery developers and the antibiotic developers and stuff like that? We've got loads of people here at Talkaoke, so come closer, come and join in if you've got something to say about this. We're basically talking about how to save the planet and whether it needs saving. Was there a point somewhere over here? Was there a point? Where was it?
Oh, there you go.
No, I mean, even new antibiotics were created by an AI, but then we need AIs then, right?
Artificial intelligence.
Yes, but then we need research. How do we do research? We travel. I don't see a way out. I really don't see a way out.
I think traveling is actually good. It actually helps.
No, I mean, I think it's the less of it's not ideal, it's not optimal, but that's what gets things done.
Right. Okay.
Right. If we want science to solve the problem, we need research, and we need to do research in a proper way.
Okay. So research in itself is a kind of way to actually save the planet. So we need to fly around, go to conferences in Texas. We've got some spare seats. Come.
Specifically Texas.
Yeah. And other conference venues are available. We've got some spare seats. Come in, come and join. Don't be shy. Come and take a seat on the table of chat, especially if you've got an idea about how to save the world, because that seems to be the big issue here, especially when it comes to things like climate change.
It's so funny that you said about empowering teenagers. I was talking to this poet today, and he was. It's really funny because I thought he's just like. Yeah, he's just a poet, but he's working with a big data company, like processing data, and they employed him to like get the data and analysts to like think about things differently.
So a poet is a kind of data analyst in a way.
Yeah, kind of. He kind of brings in like the human element and like expansion of minds. And he was saying how frustrated he gets with them, the geeks who like ask him very specific questions. And the world of art is like this. But one thing that he said, that he was recently running a workshop for teenagers, and there's a lot of poetry like influenced by Greta Thunberg, and he really sees that like back in the day there was a lot of poetry or things that people were talking about was like Harry Potter, so there was a lot of unicorns and dragons and that kind of stuff in poetry. And now he said he was watching this girl like giving her poem about climate change. She's like, really embracing it.
Different things to draw from that. I mean, also the role of the arts. You talk about science and research. Have the arts also got a role in this kind of environmental renaissance that we seem to be talking about? There's the thing about the young people. There's the data and the poets analysing the data. Where do we want to go with this conversation? Where do we want to take it? What's kind of interesting here? You might want to say something. No?
I was just smiling.
Okay. That's good. That's a good start.
If prompted, I will always say something. I think I think it's something that's touched on at NHM a lot, but it's biomimicry, which is where you design things for human uses based on animal design, because animal design has been around for kind of 6 million years, honing for its specific purpose. It's sustainable, doesn't use any oil industries or external energy. So I think learning from nature and like looking and respecting it a lot more. But yeah. Yeah, so for instance, you can feel a mosquito biting you, but you can't, you can't feel a mosquito biting you, but you can feel a needle. So they're starting to design needle heads based on a mosquito proboscis, which kind of reduces the energy. It looks a bit like a saw instead of just like a straight point, and it reduces it has like a serrated edge, and it very quickly releases energy tension, and so you can't feel it. I hope not. Yeah.
Okay, but the nose of the mosquito can actually inspire a new needle. Any other examples of this? Yeah.
I think there was the bullet train in Japan is shaped like a kingfisher's beak, because they realised that if you wanted to get trains that were to go really fast, but when they went through tunnels, it would create a sonic boom. So they looked at, well, what are the really fast animals in nature that do that? Yeah. And like, well, birds and kingfishers particularly fly really fast, but that doesn't happen to them. And that's how it's kind of it's not completely pointy. It's kind of got like a sort of a curve. It's like it's curved and then flat and then curved. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, well, amazing. More we're talking about biomimicry here. Let's get some. What's your name, by the way?
My name's Lucy, but there's anti-crash technology they're now looking at so group dynamics, like swarm behavior. It often looks like some central intelligence and they all know what they're doing, but actually they follow 3 simple rules, and they're now putting that into like anti-crash technology in smart cars. So it's like one, which is like it's all to do with distances. So if you're like the right distance to the person next to you, it's a bit like when you're walking down a corridor and you don't want to bump into someone. Yeah. So if you're at the right distance, just like stay at the right distance. But if you're too close, move away from them, or if you're too far away, move closer. And that's been put into cars.
Anyone got any biomimicry? What else can we learn from the animals that can actually improve our world? I don't know how any of these things actually make it more sustainable, but I'll come to you in a minute. You're right.
Oh no, I just say there's like a bit of a movement now into soft robotics. So rather than just trying to like make a person or a kind of automaton with made out of metal, and they're like looking at doing like soft with like air chambers and things like that, so it can allow it to swim. So again, they're looking at like squids and octopuses and things like that, to think about how to get things to move around. Because we're very good at writing like AI programs that can like play chess, but we're really bad at making robots move around. Yeah.
All right. So lots of ways. How else can we learn from the animals? Got a new face at the table? I'm not going to necessarily ask you now, but what's your name?
My name's Carl.
Carl, have you got one to throw in?
No, I don't know much about animals, but I work in my dog, cat, be silly, be kind.
Okay, maybe we could be more silly like dogs and cats. Any learning from animals?
I mean, I think it's a similar approach. It's not about learning from animals, but it's about like learning from the stuff that's around us. Trying to how do we warn future generations about the location of nuclear waste? Is a really interesting question because we don't know what languages they're going to speak. We don't know whether we can do it. Oh, do you want to jump in with your final thoughts? Yeah, go for it. So people are thinking about lots of different ways you can do this. Maybe you have digital languages, maybe you have lots of different things that you can write every single language in the world on it, but we don't know if anyone's going to speak those languages. In Finland, they were dyeing trees blue to be oh no, danger here. Right. But obviously that's what they did with the pyramids, and we just went and dug them up anyway. So we don't know that's necessarily going to work in the future. So they were what is the oldest information that we've got hold of that we have? And some of the oldest information they think we have is around for example, Great Flood in the Eastern Mediterranean Basin, and that came to us through stories. So they're now using nursery rhymes, fables, trying to build a culture of stories around about the danger of nuclear waste, which I just thought was an interesting way of, we'll find out in a few million years, I guess.
It's either too radioactive, not radioactive, or just the right level of radioactivity. Okay, so we're talking about, in a way, different ways of learning. It comes from this artist thing. Did you want to throw in another one? Yeah.
I was going to say, talking about stories, like when you see like most fables, animals represent the people. So in terms of like, I'm not a science, I work in film, but what you can learn from animals, like most fables, it'll be an animal which is a representative of a person or a message, you know, so just to point out there.
You actually sort of like project different personalities, different characters.
Like a snake or fox has a certain characteristic to it.
It just made me think of it. I think back in the day there was actually like a legitimate thing where people were saying, "Oh, your face looks like a fox's face, therefore you must be like cunning and maybe a little bit evil." And people were kind of like taking the kind of what they thought the animals represent into human facial features, like
other particular animal that you get accused of being or get against.
No, nothing comes to mind. Maybe other people can.
Okay. Lucy, you had another
I was
one?
just going to say, when it comes to storytelling, and from an evolutionary perspective, that we have always transferred information through stories, and that's why it's already in the programming here. It's something. So, for instance, animals are core parts of all different types of stories, because from an evolutionary perspective, you pay attention to things that are important, whether it be like fear, or if someone's to tell you information about a snake, you're more likely to remember that because it's a kind of natural predator.
Would an animal-based kind of story about environmental change, rather than it being about Donald Trump and Greta Thunberg, if it was about...
Well, it is about the
If
animals.
it was about, like, I don't know what animal these people would be, maybe someone could suggest.
But it is. We're just one of all of them. And I think it's just seeing us as part of the whole system rather than like us and them. It's like, that's where the change needs to happen. I think it would be a massive insult to any animal.
Okay.
Yeah, geologically, the Anthropocene began in 1945 when you could get the radioisotopes actually in the sedimentary layers. But if you look in terms of great extinctions, you have to say that really probably began about 10,000 years ago at the Clovis Point, and since then the rate of megafauna extinction has been so rapid that it's equivalent to any of the great extinctions in the past. They invented the Clovis Point, which meant that they could, after you fire a flint-tipped instrument, a spear or an arrow, it's very easy to create a new sharp edge in it. The old ones, every time you'd have to get a new one from start. All of a sudden, you could keep resharpening, you could reuse them. And basically, when the people with the Clovis Point went to the Americas, there'd been people in the Americas for 30,000 years before that, and they'd lived alongside all the megafauna. But when the Clovis Point people arrived, the megafauna were gone overnight, pretty much. And so really, at the moment, I think every half an hour, there's some significant species goes extinct. I don't know. There's so many species we haven't even discovered yet. It could be much faster. And obviously, there will always have been some turnover in the number of species, but we've got no idea what it was before the sort of like the Clovis Point.
Okay, so there's a point over here.
Back to the point on us learning about animals and stuff. I mean, they've helped us so much in history. I mean, take Chinese Kung Fu, for example. They're all based on animals. I mean, there's tiger style, there's mantis style, everything like that. I mean...
Is it really based on animals, or has it just got an animal name to make it sound a bit more...
It's actually based on animals. I mean, for example, I take a martial art called Wing Chun. That's based on a nun witnessing a crane and a snake fighting each other. So all of our motions come from a snake always going around, and there's a wing of a crane. That's why you see all these motions. And
metaphor is actually like a crucial, archaic, ancient metaphor that exists throughout our storytelling.
I think definitely. I mean, think about early humans. I mean, we weren't very good hunters back then. We scavenged from dead animals from a lion kill or something. So, yeah.
Whatever they left behind. Okay, was there a point over
Oh, no, I just want to find out more. Did you say it was a nun who'd seen the crane in there? I want to find more about this fighting nun. That sounds really cool.
Now I'm leaving you guys. So just a final thought, or maybe just so a new topic. We're talking about animals and how we can learn from them. And what do you think about eating them? Should we stop eating them? So did you know? I wasn't here. I'm not sure. So if it helps or not, or how we can deal with that. So I'm sure other people have thoughts on that, because I guess apparently everyone does nowadays. So.
Do we learn more from animals when we eat them or when we don't eat them? That's the question, I suppose. And where do we want to go with this? Do we want to throw in this challenge about eating the animals, or learning from the animals?
This is not actually eating, but it was another interesting instance of learning, like design, was the like running blades for Paralympians. I think were based on like something to do with like cheetah's legs, but basically they like they basically revolutionized the way that we like can like make humans
So
help humans, I suppose.
See how thinking happened. Cheetahs, very fast animals. Why don't we just see how they're running? Let's make the blades for Paralympic athletes. Are there any animals out there that you would like to learn from that actually have got something that would be kind of fun to adopt?
Well, just on the cheetah, you know, they can like dislocate their back so that they stretch, so that they can have like a further stretch, and then like, anyway, fun cheetah.
Okay, so more cheetah facts. You've got a lot of facts about animals, haven't you? Yeah.
Just this thing about the eating the animals, because some people think, oh, we should all be vegan. But if you look at like a sow, she has about 14 teeth, so she can raise a very large litter, and she can raise them, quite a lot of them in her life. Now, you don't have this many kids if you don't want them to become someone's dinner, because it's just not sustainable. If you've got like up to 2 kids and you put a lot of energy into them and raise them, take care of them. I'm saying, yeah, it's well, because otherwise you wouldn't. Well, no, because the wild ancestors have a very similar number of teeth. I think. I don't think they've actually increased the number of teeth usually they've obviously the same as the cow and the sheep. They've been bred to be docile. They've been bred to be to basically put on lots of weight. They've been bred for all sorts of different things. But there's certain fundamental things about them that we haven't changed hugely. So if they weren't in the past, they would have had lots of predators. These megafauna I was talking about, they would have been eating them, and now we are basically the top predator. That's why we've wiped out all the other predators.
Okay. I mean, is it a good story talking about these stories? Is that a good story to have? We're like the only predators left.
Well, I mean, a bit facile. I was going to say I've got 2 nipples, put on weight easily, and I'm pretty docile, but I don't want to be anyone's dinner.
Would you be more likely to be dinner if you had more nipples?
I really don't know. I mean, they're completely useless as it is. I mean, why do men have nipples? I mean, I think that can be a start.
What's the answer to that one? Why do men have nipples?
Because you start the same in the womb, and so then you have this, but you both have nipples, and then you start to differentiate into male and female. Yeah, so a clit and a penis start at the same place.
Okay, so it's kind of like the basic plan, the default plan.
Yeah, you have your same blueprint, and then it's like.
Well, then we just we're just pimped up in different ways, like pimp my ride or something.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Where do we want to go with this? Would we pimp ourselves up in different ways? You're not sure about the nipples. Would you change that? Would you adopt animal characteristics if you wanted to? And what would you? Yeah.
Because like before I came here, they were talking about how to save the world and kind of like animals and storytelling. I think the stories we have for all the narrative we have for saving the world is kind of not really working. Yeah. And like storytelling is really important part of that, the way you tell a narrative. Yeah. And so it's really kind of like we need to save ourselves rather than a pig, which I guess most people don't really care about.
So, I mean, could we tell a better story?
100%. Like the narrative needs to change, otherwise people don't change.
Okay, so we've got to change the narrative when it comes to all of it, yeah?
Oh no, I think that's just a really interesting point, because you see the move recently, especially in the UK, about anti-plastic. That was because Blue Planet told an amazing, really powerful story, and that's like a really important message. We definitely do it, but there's also some problems with that. Is that people are really anti-plastic, so lots of people have been like buying things like paper packaging, glass packaging, which actually produces more carbon footprint, which is not a problem in like, I think we should still think about using less plastic, because that's obviously bad, or maybe how we're thinking about disposing it. But I think that's really true about what you say, like how do we tell that climate story?
No one can argue that Blue Planet series completely changed the paradigm about people thinking about plastics.
But then you have to make sure the narrative stays and you just don't create a trend, because it's very easy to be trendy and just do something because you want to look
It's
good.
gotta be a lasting narrative.
Yeah, lasting. Like, well, that's how you your national identity or family identity, us as like a species, or like every kind of key message comes through like a story at the end of the day. So.
Okay, so we've got to come up with some really good stories if we want people to. We've been talking all night about people changing and doing different stuff, but have we got the stories to actually get people to change and get people to rethink? Come and join the table. We've got one spare seat over here. Yes, that's you.
Different people respond to different narratives, so you can't just tell the same narrative and everyone will respond to it. So for instance, there's a kind of focus on the type of people that are in the environmental movement, and like how can a single mother with 3 kids really listen to like this story that's being told while she's just trying to earn some money. But there is 3, it's called the values model approach, where like, in terms of looking at sustainability communication, and there's 3 ways to communicate it. There are people that will always care about money and what other people think about them, so you communicate it in a cost way. There's another one which is like people who care about being on the front line of like being the most progressive and doing the right thing. And then the third one is people like things that stay the same. They don't want to see change, and you have to, when you're telling your story, try and pitch it across those 3 or tell 3 different stories.
Okay.
Different people like different things.
That sounds like a tough job to me. Give us a final thought before you go. Have you got anything that struck a chord with you tonight? What was big?
No, sorry, we haven't been here for long enough. We haven't really caught on to it. It was very interesting.
I've got to head off, but I want to leave a final thought on. I went to a nature talk recently, and they were talking about how we've just come so accustomed with all of this like technology and all this other stuff, and then say we walk into a forest, all these animals, their stress level is just a complete straight line, this guy told me, and now our stress is just up and down everywhere. So it's just, they just find a way of life. I mean, we're here answering emails and phone calls and all these other things. I mean, what does anyone else think about that? Have we made this easier on ourselves with all this technology? We're talking about virtual reality, we're talking about calling someone from another country or flying there. Or should we just go back and just respect nature again?
Okay. I think people would agree with you, but what does that actually mean? Going back and respecting nature, that's a good final thought. But it means we need to get some of you guys, this is not a spectator sport, come and get involved. Just sit around them, we just need to sit around the table and look clever. You don't have to say anything. But come and sit down, Yes, you can do it, let's give them a round of applause. It did work. Okay, so maybe we should just quickly come and have a seat, come and get involved in this. This is Talkaoke, yes. So maybe we should just quickly get a round of names. Well, I feel like we know we've got Carl, we've got Helena, we've got Lucy, we've got Evie. What's your name? Jeremy and
Amy.
Kieran.
Sarah.
And what was it again?
Jasmine.
Jasmine's right, of course, yeah.
Harriet.
Matthew.
And I'm Mikey. So, I mean, there's a lot we've been chatting. Come and have a seat if you want. You don't have to say anything. Yeah, I'm looking at you as well. It's got to work in a certain way, the round of applause thing. You have to get the whole peer pressure. Oh, it did work. Okay, so what's your name?
Hassan.
And?
Mohammed.
It's what?
Mohammed.
So at the moment, I mean, there's been a few things on the table we've been talking a little bit about. I mean, I feel like the kind of, if I might say, leitmotif of tonight has been about saving the planet. It's been about this kind of, oh, aren't I great because I've got a bamboo lunchbox kind of thing. And, you know, it's been about how do we actually do it? How do we get other people to do what we're doing, be vegetarian, all this kind of stuff. And there's been a lot of chat about learning from other animals. Did you know that they're redeveloping needles to be more like mosquito noses because you can't feel that go in, for example. And so you can learn from animals in so many ways. And what it turned into also is that we can actually tell better narratives with animals. When you start talking about how the seahorses are getting overrun with plastic, it's much more compelling than just talking about plastic pollution generally. So We're talking about really some of those things about how to actually tell a better story and how to actually get people on board and, see the change that we want to see. These are some of the things we've been talking about. We don't have to carry on talking about that. We can talk about anything. Talkaoke, because you're right. So where do you want to take this? Anybody?
I would like more days off in the week so that I can do all the things that I know would make me greener, but I don't have time to do. Like compost, garden, cook my meals properly. And then all of that would mean that I'm not like buying a takeaway meal, or I'm not just like buying tomatoes and then they've gone mouldy because then I've suddenly had to not eat them all in the right time.
This on too much work.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Okay, so the tomato problem or the general lack of
All
tomato?
of it. Yeah, like vegetables in the fridge going off because I don't have time to make a meal. By the time I get in, I've only got like an hour or something before I need to go to bed. Yeah, guilty. Yeah.
You're guilty about it. Okay. Interesting.
I would say that that's your response to government pushing it as like an individual responsibility, that like it's you that should be recycling in our really difficult way of recycling system, and you don't have a local compost, you should be taking it to your local compost and finding a really niche place to put it, rather than, hey, we have this lovely recycling system which makes it almost difficult to not recycle and be compostable. I think it should come from like, and then corporations should be like selling fruit in manageable packages rather than over pushing the amount of fruits that you buy more so they get more money, rather than like getting a manageable amount of tomatoes.
You're blaming the government and corporations more than anything else.
It's very stereotypical, isn't it?
And what about the question of a lack of time that Eddie's got because she's working too much?
But it all should be set up so that it should facilitate a good work life.
Not quite quick.
Okay, I'm going to come to you in a second.
I was going to say, I think like a massive con is with the kind of climate change movement or whatnot and trying to live greener is it puts everything on the individual when actually there's kind of systematic structural problems, such as maybe working too much or just the way you live, that for example outside of London you can't have to have a car to work, and so it's not, there's always individual responsibility, but I think it's gone too much to the individual responsibility and leading to
kind of bought this thing that it's about us as
it's a societal problem which needs a societal solution.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a societal problem. It's not about the individual, and you're kind of backing that up with the government composting schemes that should be there that are not.
I feel like Effie is a product. Sorry. But it's a product of like I'm at fault. It's me, and why can't I do it? I'm working as hard as I can, but that means I don't have time to be sustainable. But actually, that's just like a success of the government who've been like, yes, you should solve it.
So it's the government not really doing what they should be doing. What do people think on this? Like, could the government do better?
I just think the governments have never reduced the working week at all. The only thing that's ever reduced the working week is trade unions. So I'd suggest everyone join a trade union, start a trade union, get everyone in your workplace to join a trade union, and then we'll all have a much, we'll have like 3-day working week or whatever, which we were always promised it was going to be in the future, and instead the working week is getting longer and longer and longer. So just join a trade union.
Okay, I think we've got that message. Is that the answer? Trade unions, societal change?
Hopping back a little bit, but maybe I'm being naive, but I'm sort of like strangely hopeful. So Teletext used to run this thing during the 1990s called the short story competition for primary school kids, and you may have done it if you were in primary school in the 1990s. But it was all a con. So it was all actually run by a couple of linguistics professors from Oxford, where they'd map what are kids writing about now. And as they started spending more money on Welsh language education and devolution in the late 1990s, you see Welsh kids are doing all their stories about dragons. All the Scottish kids are writing about Celtic stuff. After Philip Pullman books came out, everyone started spelling demons with the AE the other way around. And we're now in a world where I think if you look at what young people care about, 25% of 18 to 25-year-olds are vegetarian or vegan. I think if you go below 18, it's probably even more than that. And a little bit of me thinks that you're right, the strategies the government currently has in place aren't great. But I also think culture sort of eats strategy for breakfast. And after a little while, if we start moving towards a culture which is more eco-centric in the way it deals with it, I think that stuff will come, it will happen.
We've just got to wait for those people to filter through and be the...
Oh no, I mean, I think we encourage it, we try and speed that process up, we support people who are sort of building that culture. I think Greta Thunberg is a great example.
Okay, so if everyone was like Greta Thunberg and got a yacht to America, we'd all be fine. Lucy, let me get a...
Sorry, I think it's an interesting... I need to go to the toilet, but I just wanted to... But I need to, something that you said made me think, but because if culture is also the barometer of what people are talking about, does that mean that all the culture, because in a way, if I go to theatre, if I go to gallery, I kind of want to be transported from the world that I'm in a way, and then if all I'm thinking about in my daily life is climate change, and I go and see shows about climate change because that kind of is what people want to talk about. Like, where is the escape? Like, you know.
From all this, I mean, we certainly had no escape tonight. We had a brief sojourn into animals and what you can learn from animals, but it's basically climate change, so you're right. There's no escape.
I also wonder, with the teletext thing, who are the children that are writing into teletext? Is it their parents that are with them that are like, let's write a story and go into teletext? Lovely darling, you can write a story. And then
So you're saying it's a certain demographic that's writing the stories to teletext?
possibly the stories that we're hearing about climate. I don't know.
Okay. So do you have faith in the kids and the young people?
Yes.
All right. Let's spread this out. I'm going to come back to you.
I mean, I can answer that. But basically, it was just that, like, so primary schools entered the kids to do, I think, usually between 9 and 10, and they'd get book vouchers if they were like a featured story.
Okay. Okay. Primary schools at large. Okay. So do we have faith in the kids on this side? Do you have faith in the kids?
Depends which kids.
Some kids yes, some kids no.
Some of the kids are in my era, I've got no faith in them at all, and some I think I've got loads of faith in. They're just different. They'll grow up just as.
But compared to, let's say, the 40-year-olds.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm just watching my street, and I'm just watching kids just not being. I don't think they're thinking about it, but they often take the wrappers off and just drop it without looking.
Okay, so they haven't got that local environmental concern at all.
I just think there isn't really. They just don't connect with it because nobody's. I was taught that you mustn't drop.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
I mean, you were talking about kids, but I mean, it's like, what are they going to do different when they're adults than we do? They'll just be the same, but just have some people excluded, some people not excluded, some people care, some people not care. I don't think the debate that's going on is really hitting many people.
Okay, so it's going to be the same mix. Most people are not going to be that bothered about it.
Just be the same mix. Just be the same mix.
I think with children these days, they look up to celebrities. So if we get someone who's a celebrity to be like, hey, look at me, I'm going to recycle this, I think more children, well, possibly those who are influenced more by by celebrities, would actually start doing stuff like that.
So it's the influencers we need to
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, but there's also that, I feel like there's that disconnect though between children and nature now because of obviously like social media, loads of technology and stuff. Like, how much are they actually engaging with the outdoors and nature? It's very different when I was younger. I was out all the time, but I just feel like there's a huger gap between,
Okay, so are young people engaging with nature? Are they just engaging with their phones? I'll come to you in a second.
Yeah, I just want to pick up that because I'm assuming that your street is in London, and I'm assuming that when you're talking about kids in your street, it's in London, just because we're here. So I just thought it's interesting about how do people think you can teach people how to connect with nature in a city? That's a question to the table.
City, we've got the connection specialist in the filmmaker, Cole. Are kids more disconnected from nature because they're on their phones all the time? And can they connect if they live in a big city?
I was going to make a different point, but that's a good question. The answer is I don't know, but I'm certain the more you get kids or anyone more involved in nature, and you see the connection between how nature affects yourself and how do you, if you want to eat meat, fair enough, you need to see like the food chain, and actually that education dispels the ignorance and helps break down those kind of barriers to people just going, oh, I don't care. Because you need to actually see how you, as an individual and as a society, actually affect the environment. I think there's a massive disconnect. And so that's why people just care so much about like smaller things rather than actually going, actually, I have a much bigger impact. And but it's hard to see that impact. Like, you never see a cow die, so it's hard to imagine that. And so you just eat the meat because whatever. Like, I had a burger before I came in, but
Apropos, in a way, I think I agree with you because, there's a finite. I think there's a finite number of different combinations of people's characteristics, and if you are just not going to care, then nothing's going to turn you. You're just not going to care, and that's just how it is. And then the second point is that my friends run. My friend's working for a forest school, which is the only type of school like this in Poland, where that is, and it's outside of the big city, and it's actually like I think it's a private school. They still follow the curriculum, but the way they do it, they just they hardly ever spend time indoors. They learn rain or shine, whatever. They sit like on these little like blocks of wood, and they just like frolic around, and they really don't do any homework or anything. And I'm like, oh, come on, let's introduce that into working environment. But I think it's brilliant.
Should our kids be sitting on logs, learning in the forest?
Question. What is connected to nature? What do you mean when you say connected to nature?
Well, I didn't come up with it. I can't remember who came up with it now. Connected to nature, what do you mean?
So I'm not very good with words. You're probably better at this. So just realising that you do share the same space. You're sharing the same planet, and that whatever you do is going to have an impact on them, and that we're all connected, and feeling like you know everything out there is part of your life as well, and you have a responsibility to look after that. Is that fair
we're just
enough?
another species in an ecosystem. We should stop trying to feel like we've sort of risen above somehow. Or,
okay. I mean, do you think the school in the forest would help in that?
I don't know.
No, anyone else? Someone help me out with this one. What do people think? Are we connected to nature? And what is even nature? We're in the Natural History Museum. Are we surrounded by nature, or are we surrounded by dead things? Maybe, yeah.
Especially here.
What is? You're a scientist, so what is connected to nature?
Well, so I'm not a biologist by any stretch of the imagination. So sorry, you're having to lean. But I think being connected to nature is, like you say, being aware of the space that you're in. It is hard in cities, I think, and that is obviously where the majority of people live. So this forest school is like a great idea, but it's just not going to be possible for most people. Which is probably why it's not done, I guess, because most people live in cities, and most people have like smaller locations that they have to learn in, and that's just it, really, which is just a bit of a shame. But you have to kind of that's just the way.
So you don't think we can sort of go that way? Your hand up.
Oh no, I think this is why I'm interested in, like, is there a way we can make our cities more, because I think there is nature in cities, but I think at the moment it's quite like hostile to it, and is there a way that we can make cities more livable for like our idea of nature? So I suppose anything that's like not human and man-made, and does that not make it more livable for us? So I'm going to... Yeah, or something like that. Or I'm going to shamelessly use Evie as an example here, but when you went to Deptford Creek to go and have like a wading session there, and it was like they're looking at things like things like abandoned shopping trolleys, and it was like, oh, okay, this has now been dumped in this environment, which is obviously bad and sad, but there's like, oh, but you can't just like remove it, because now a lot of animals have made it at home. It's quite a good place for like frogs and stuff to lay tadpoles, and it's like quite an interesting idea. Is like maybe we need to think of city as a space for nature as well, and how we can make it better.
In a way, art, nature.
So animals are evolving to the urban environment, and so I did my dissertation on this, so I could talk for days. But so, for instance, like geckos have sticky hands to walk upside down on trees in the wild, but because we're surrounded by shiny surfaces, they're evolving stickier, in short, hands, so they can walk on all the different surfaces. And they are evolving and changing, and it's a whole question about like if we're conserving animals, do we want to conserve their genes, and like if we have a zoo, like what is the real point of a zoo, and when we're designing spaces. Also, so loads of people are putting up, and I would love to know if anyone has the answer to this, but I think loads of people are putting up like ivy walls and like green walls in order to like filter pollution. But when plants are stressed, they release a gas that I think isn't good for humans. So actually they're putting all of these things up in schools and schools and gardens and in cities that actually haven't been tested if they're going to be useful for us. I don't know if anyone knows that, but
So you just assume that a green wall is a good thing, but
it will filter pollution. But yeah, it's really not good. Yeah, gas you out. Yeah. No one wants to be gassed out.
This is the Natural History Museum. We've finally got to the subject of nature, what it is, how do we connect to nature in the city. How do we connect? And is it about just turning shopping trolleys into tadpole breeding grounds, or I don't know? Okay.
Just like follow on from the point of stress, like with people, the lack of nature in cities is what can be detrimental to like mental health. But, like the lack of green spaces, quiet time, and all the other stuff it kind of brings, the cleaner air. So actually, like for ourselves in a very selfish way, like nature's actually really important to like us.
So
you
it's
know.
important for our mental health as well. That's an interesting point.
You have 15% increase in productivity when you have plants in the workplace.
Okay, even stress plants on the green wall.
Potted plants in the workplace.
So we need a bit of green one way or another, whether it's a green wall or a potted plant. That makes us more productive. Do we even want to be more productive? Is that something?
If you work at the Natural History Museum, you are not allowed to have potted plants on your desk.
Why?
Because we're collection space. IPM, pest management, we're not allowed.
Integrated pest management risk.
Okay, so you're not allowed to have plants?
No, we can have fake ones and just pretend.
Plants that are in the collection, but it's the collection space, which is like, we have to look after the collections. The museum has a responsibility to look after these collections. So, no plants. No, we've got loads of rocks on our desks, but no.
I mean, does it affect your product?
My office looks out over the ice rink. So if you are walking out the front and you see a green alien in the window, that's my office. So just so you're aware.
So this is like your more sociable version of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I have to have the blow up green alien. I mean, that's my equivalent.
That was you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's my equivalent of a potted plant. It improves my mental health having my green alien there. So yeah.
Has anyone done a study to compare the potted plant with the green alien to see?
I have. It's great.
Okay, so maybe there is a solution here.
We do have a lovely wildlife garden that you can go for walks around at lunchtime, and they do often do activities for the public, and children could go pond dipping, and so we have that kind of natural space where to draw people in, and kids can sort of learn about nature there.
Right.
Oh yeah, and the sheep, yeah.
Okay, so that's not too bad then. It's not okay, right?
I'm just on a point of like, youth are so disconnected from nature nowadays. But I also goes back to like which youth are we talking about, and like how easy is it for different youth? Like if you've just lived in inner city London, or like I recently did a project with like inner city kids in Nottingham, like they like don't go anywhere else and like can't afford to go anywhere else. So like it's kind of how we can't really blame for like not really caring about something they've never really seen or appreciated or been in their sphere of existence. I don't know.
Right. I mean, so what's the answer to that, would you say? Or is it just blaming people, or is it about...
No, it's like understanding, first of all, where people's sphere of existence is and what influences their decisions and their behavior, then trying to address it that way and working with people that you're making policies and things about rather than like making decisions for them.
So it's about working with those people, got new contributors.
Yeah, like to that point, there's a huge difference between people who choose to be ignorant and like children who don't like have the option or know any better because it's not in their immediate like financial circumstance. Like you can definitely blame people for their choices, but like children aren't going to start with that.
Children for their choices.
Yeah, like until they're at least an adult and out of their parents' home, they don't have a choice in what they eat, really, what they do, where they go.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think you can blame adults either that then were children that kind of were.
I think it depends on socioeconomic circumstance, but there are definitely people who have the option to educate themselves and choose profit over environmental impacts. Like I've had conversations with people in this building about how climate change is a myth and really it's being paid for by massive science and that fossil fuels are suffering because of it. And like a very
No, there've been none of those people here tonight.
good, like a
You'd be
very
surprised the amount of stuff that people when we
like
come out with science and they're all
a
like,
super
"Oh, that's
wealthy
real."
human being who like has the power to change his circumstance and his opinion and be educated and chooses not to. You can blame that. You can't blame people who are a victim of their circumstance.
Okay. All right, so where do we want to go with this? We're talking about the blame game now. You can't blame the kids, but you can blame the climate change, a middle-aged climate change denier.
I was just going to say maybe there's an argument for, like, as part of our national curriculum, we have things like, PSHE, I think it was like personal, social and health education. Like, maybe we should replace the E with environment.
Work out what E was before, but anyway, before it became environment. But is it about education? I mean, is it about blame anyway? I mean, are we blaming people a bit too much? We're blaming those climate deniers. Is it really their fault that they choose?
Well, I do think it's like about looking at ways to better integrate ourselves with nature. Like often there are loads of kids that are thought to have behavioral problems, then you like send them out to like a stable and they understand what it's like to just like look after an animal and like have this different way of education and learning system. There's like ways of like integrating nature has positive benefits in education. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for some appreciation there. Carl.
I was just going to say it's always about education. But education never stops, and that's why narrative is so important, because that's what people that will like latch onto, right? Especially like social media, which creates a bubble or bubbles. You can just get all the information from one point, whether it's about politics or football or whatever it is, and so then people just like, well, it happens to all of us, right? You only know what you see, and if you only see certain things, that's all you know. It's like education and getting people out of their comfort zone, out of their bubbles, and getting people out of inner city into countryside, vice versa. It's so important.
Okay, so people are kind of these days stuck in their bubble, and maybe the climate deniers are stuck in a climate denier bubble.
But then they come here and they're like, I don't understand the climate change deniers that come to the museum, because you're a bit like, why are you here? But they do. They come to, so like the number of times that we kind of come out and the scientists are often locked away, and then we kind of like let loose on the public, and it's always like occasionally people will come up and they will be like, yeah, I don't believe in any of what you do, sorry, like, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to? Okay, great, good for you. Like, do you want me to? Why are you telling me that? Like, it's so mean. I mean, like, so I'm a geologist by training, and a lot of geology is using the past to work out what's going on currently when you're looking at things like the rock record. And obviously it kind of, you assume that the geological record has been going on for 4.5 billion years, and obviously that's quite like for some people who have certain beliefs, they don't agree with that. But yet it's when they come and they insist on telling you that.
But I mean, are they willing to listen to your side?
No. Then I'm like, why talk to me then?
They're talking at you, but they're not actually listening to what you're coming back.
Yeah, they watch a whole talk that I do, and then afterwards they're like, actually, sorry, I just don't believe in anything you say.
Okay. I mean, I just want to say, by the way, here tonight, you're very welcome to say that. Yeah. Because in this space, you don't have to believe anything. But I mean, what do people think about that? If like, you've got totally different views of the world. People don't believe in the geology, in the climate science.
I find it bizarre, because you can have personal beliefs about whatever you want, but evidence is evidence. And if you're looking at hard data, I don't feel like that's a matter of personal opinion so much as realizing true things. I don't know.
Okay, so you're saying data is different from personal belief. Data is data. Yeah. You can't argue with the data.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not to believe in or not believe in. It's not a faith thing.
Okay. All right. Can you argue with the data? We've got all hands up everywhere, but let's come to
Just a point from a minute ago. Across the other side of Hyde Park, you got Paddington Station, and some friends of mine run a thing in Glastonbury called Paddington Farm, and it was set up by the council so that kids would get a chance to go out to the countryside and to see animals and stuff like that. Probably a slightly false situation, because it's not really a commercial farm, so it's more like a petting zoo, so that you get the idea that animal welfare is a lot higher than it probably is, and most of the time it gets in your plate. But this thing about the BBC got in trouble a little while ago, because every time they had a climate scientist on, they would follow it up with Nigel Lawson, basically saying, oh, he didn't believe in climate change. Now, I'm with Greta Thunberg. She basically said on TV in America, where I come from, it's not a matter of belief, it's about the data. But you find that Nigel Lawson's extremely well paid by the fossil fuel companies. BP sponsoring stuff here. You're taking the shillings from the fossil fuel companies, they're paying people. All these people, supposedly middle-aged people, supposedly they don't believe it, they're paying that. They're paid to kill us, to destroy our lives. But they shouldn't be allowed the oxygen and publicity. Just bury them under the sea.
So
one thing, like, people talk a lot about you have to have like a balanced point of view, so they have a climate scientist on and then climate change denier, but like it's 99% of scientists believe in climate change versus the 1% that don't, so you should have 99 people shouting at one person telling them that they're wrong, like if you actually want to have a balanced debate on that. But with data, so like I agree, as a scientist, data is data and it tells its own story, but they did do a study on what people infer from data, and essentially it just reaffirms whatever belief you already hold, even if the conclusion is to the detriment of it. So data is data.
Look at the data in different ways and just affirm your
People,
own
yeah, people generally affirm their own belief, and that's like what a psychological study found. So like, I agree, data is data, but not everybody sees it the way we do.
Do you think, obviously we get these people, we've now heard about these people that come around annoying all the scientists with their lack of belief in the data. Does it matter that these people are walking around with these paradoxical beliefs, or?
Yes, because they're massively influential. Like, particularly the ones that we speak to are very wealthy donors and things like that, who have a lot of influence in this sphere and like government and politics. So it matters massively.
Okay. And how do we, can you actually get them on board? Can you actually change their view of the data? You desperately want, I know there's two people with hands, but you desperately want to say something.
Well, I think what Sarah's saying is completely correct. I think you are coming at it from a point of trying to educate people, and I think the problem is that people don't want to be educated sometimes I don't know, but I think as long as the best thing to do if you are up against that kind of very like adamant belief that's isn't very open to listening to other ones, is to sort of just remain calm and just be like, well, this is what I believe, this is what the data is showing me, this is what the evidence is saying, and in so many cases it's just not possible to change their view.
So you just go, well, how are you going to interpret this data? Here's the data, and just stay calm.
Just give them the facts, and like sometimes it's just, yeah.
Just give them the facts. That was a point.
I was going to say, like, so what you're talking about is just basically a confirmation bias. We all have a confirmation bias and want to believe what we want to keep our beliefs the same, basically, and what our friends think, what our families think. So I think it can definitely change people's minds, but I think the way the information or the way the data makes you feel and how it's presented and who's the messenger and what the message is more important than the data.
Right.
Because people don't really care about numbers. What they care about is feelings and their perception.
So they want to, in a way, be friends with the people. It's like if they're friends with the person, then maybe they'll be more.
Well, also to change people's minds, you have to empathise with them, and I think the messenger and message is more important than the data, because numbers are numbers and they can be read 1,000 different ways.
You can upset some scientists here with this.
No,
I think it's okay.
Yeah, I guess as an older person here, I want to comment that it does seem to me that something is changing in attitudes, that it's not all to do with the people with power sticking with their antiquated attitudes. I mean, it seems to me that there is a real shift going on. What I see with you and other people your sort of age is not a predictable sort of linear thing from the experiences that politics as I've grown up with. So it's got better and it's different. The primacy of reworking the relationship between people and the environment is not something that we were that preoccupied when I was in my 20s, say, and it just, I mean, there were people that cared about the environment, but it didn't have the political saliency. And so I think something is really happening here. I think it seems to me like there's a real historical shift, and I'd urge everyone to take heart, really, that is something that our generation, I don't think, would have expected.
Do you think some of these climate change deniers will end up, in the
Well, yeah, I think it's always worth looking at, what political space can get occupied and where is particular discourse possible or not. And certain types of discourse are gradually getting made impossible, if that makes any sense. So I think it will happen, and probably quite fast.
Yeah. So it's not. Yeah. Okay.
That is really perceptive in a sense, because I'm just thinking about, I think you said something like views that are now held will just disappear and just won't be held anymore. People just won't countenance it, or it just won't be part of our society. And you can think of, slavery. It's just, and there's more slavery now than there ever was, but everyone knows it's wrong, whereas before everyone thought it was good. Suffragette movement, and the idea that women should have the right to vote. So it's nice to hear you say that, because yeah, I think you're right. These things take time.
These kind of shifts, underground shifts.
Just a sort of example of that. So, I mean, there are shows on television which were just normal in the 70s, and now they wouldn't show. I mean, the black and white minstrel show, for example, where people... Yeah, do you remember that? And, I mean...
About Al Jolson? And I'd only heard him sing on the radio, and he actually had a very nice voice. And I actually thought he was black at one point, because then I saw a clip of him on YouTube. I was totally shocked that he was blacked up.
So
and apparently he did like singing black songs, but to get ahead he had to sing them blacked up.
Wow, okay, so maybe that we could be a bit more optimistic, and we're going to hit upon a climate change denier here and there, but there is this seismic shift. Carl, you're standing up now? Yeah, I do need to leave. Okay, give us a final thought, because you've contributed a lot. I mean, you've said a lot about how it's all about, it's not necessarily about the facts, it's about the narrative as well, about these compelling stories. Just give us a final thought.
Like, whatever someone's belief, there's still a person underneath, and there's a lot more things which connect us than the belief system, which as we all get older and I don't know, move and have kids and whatever, like, all our beliefs change anyway. So
it's about this connection you're talking about, connecting.
Yeah, you always have to connect with a person before you can even do anything in terms of having a conversation, and you find that kind of common ground, whether it's a political belief or just the fact that you're another person.
Okay.
So I need to go. Sorry.
It's kind of more of a question, but so with this general positive movement, so obviously there are huge historical changes that are indefinitely more positive than they used to be, but even in say the last half a decade, does anyone, particularly anyone of color around the table, think that there is a regression? Because I'm Middle Eastern, and I think it's particularly in the last half a decade, my life has gotten worse with racism. So obviously people know racism's wrong, but now you have leaders of the world who say horrifically racist things all the time, and it's fine.
So it's not quite a straightforward thing.
I'll say something about that. My life has got considerably worse. I mean, really bad. Yeah. Economically, absolutely outrageously bad. Lose your jobs, things come down. But, no, I want to say this, but because of that, I have become more engaged. So actually, as a person, I've been brought into discussions because I haven't had the distractions or this. So it's quite interesting, because I would say personally I'm happier now with my economic limitations, because I'm more aware about things, because I've got involved in things. So that's quite interesting where you say you go backwards. I've gone backwards economically, but I've gone forwards consciously.
What do you put this growth in racism down to, or discrimination?
Where I am, I don't have a growth in racism. My area community is absolutely lovely.
So what is it about?
But I know that as soon as I get outside London, and in Brexit land is what we call it, and I've got family in Edinburgh, and I used to like to drive up and stop off in Blackburn places. No, I won't do that anymore. No way. No. In fact, I'll fly. Because I don't like flying, but I would rather fly than drive all the way through those things, because it has gone. But when you get to Scotland, it's very funny you should say that. When you get to Scotland, my relatives look like me in Scotland. Yeah. It's funny, because there it was more racist, and it was run by, and now, because of the struggles, they've got better. So it's quite interesting.
Okay, so it's not
it doesn't go like that.
A linear thing. It's and we're having a bit of a setback. Let's get a final thought from you guys. Final thought.
I really like the point that you made at the end about shift of generations, and I think sometimes I feel quite anxious or glum about the way things are going, but that actually gives me a bit of hope. So I think what both of you said. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
On a similar note, I think it was Extinction Rebellion did their research and thought if you get 7% of people in a society believing something strongly, then you get this switching moment where suddenly everything starts to happen. I think if you think back 20 years ago, you couldn't be gay and serve in the armed forces, and now that would obviously be a ridiculous thing for anyone to think. I think we may be getting to that moment, potentially, with the environment.
Yeah. maybe this is happening with the environment. Where do we want to take this? Do we want to talk about the question of racism, or a kind of general sort of retraction of, or maybe a shift back away from progress, or do we want to talk about this optimism? Where do we want to go with this? Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I guess it's a bit of a shift back. As a pessimistic counterpoint to your everything is getting better, it troubles me a bit that things like the environment and climate change are considered political at all, because it shouldn't be. It's a lot worse in America, obviously.
So what is it if it's not political?
It's a statistical, it's a scientific fact. You've got this annoying situation in America where you've got, I don't believe in that because of my political beliefs. Because I'm aligned with the Republican Party, that means I follow the Republican viewpoint, which is set at, this is not happening. And I just find that so troubling that it's been taken out of science, which is what it is.
Politicization of it means that 50% of the people are not allowed to believe in that science.
Yeah, and it's the same with lots of other things lately.
So if we've got too political?
I think the way a lot of people talk about like political opinions is if it's like it's a barricade. So if it's a political opinion, it's all right to have it, even if it's deeply racist or it's damaging the environment. It gives you this umbrella to be like, well, that's just my political opinion, and I'm allowed it. And like same with religious freedom, because there are parts of religion which are detrimental to huge groups of people's rights, and you're allowed to hold it because it's a religious belief. And it's just, at what point do you start evaluating entire common good over like a political opinion? So like, it's my political opinion to be serviced by huge oil industries in America, so I don't believe in climate change. Like, that's not a political opinion. Like, you're just corrupt.
Okay, all right, so where does political opinion end? In a way, so there's this question about the rights to hold a certain belief, and the rights, some might even say freedom of speech. Where does this, become just corruption?
There is, quite recently, I don't know his name, and I'm glad I don't, because he's garbage, but he had an issue with having soldiers of color in a recent war movie, and he said it's unrealistic, it's just PC gone mad, and it's like incorrect. Like, the people that fought in these wars weren't just white. And then when he was challenged on that, he was just like, well, I feel that way, and I am entitled to feel that way and say what my feelings are. I'm like, well, no, you're not. It's a lie. It's just a lie, and you're a bigot.
Okay, so...
But somebody had him on, I think it was the BBC, to air out this, horrible opinion.
I mean, what should we do with these bigoted, horrible opinions?
Someone said get them in the sea earlier, and I, fully back it.
Okay, we've got a couple of spare seats for Hammer. Can I have a sit down? Don't worry, I won't badger you, hassle you, unless you want to say something.
But I want to say, moving beyond political opinion, if you're talking about developing economies and you're talking about net zero by, I don't know, in next decade, should countries in the Middle East or whatever be held to the same standard whereby they haven't developed their infrastructure yet and they have to think about the well-being of their citizens and improving the economy, and how do you balance that with climate change? Even if I do believe in it, then what do you...
Around to you, what do you think about that?
No, that's my question.
Okay. You've not got a view on it?
Huh?
You don't have a view?
My view is they shouldn't be held to the same standard, but at the same time, I do believe this is urgent, but I worry that these countries get left behind because there's already a big divide, and if you hold them to the same standard, then this divide's going to stay or it's going to grow.
Okay, so there's already
Well, it's a really, really interesting point. I think it's a really good point. When I was studying, we had to do kind of courses on mining and oil companies and things like that. The justification that my lecturers would give was actually really, really interesting, because she said basically everybody is entitled to the same quality of life, and in some cases that's going to mean that countries where the quality of life is not the same as it is, say, in the UK, are going to use the means that they have and that they are able to get that same quality of life. So it's always going to happen. Studying into the oil companies are always going to go and get oil, and mining companies are always going to go and mine. So because of that reason, because everybody is entitled to the same quality of life. So there are two things that she pointed out. The first was that that doesn't mean that we should be doing the same thing. You know, we have a quality of life here. We are in a position, the UK is in a position to look for more sustainable ways of achieving that same quality of life. And the other thing is to also improve the sustainability of mining and oil and things like that, which again I think is, you know, I think research is being done into that, how well that's working or not. But it's almost like we may as well set kind of use more sustainable ways to kind of build our quality of life, and then eventually the countries that kind of get to the point where they have the same will move in the same direction as well. Yeah, I mean it's a really difficult point because everybody is entitled to the same quality of life. Like.
Okay, and then I'm just going to come to Lucy.
Unless you, you've got to define quality of life. And you said we have a quality of life, but there's a lot of people where I live have a very bad quality of life.
Where do you live?
I live up in Hackney, Dalston.
Oh, Hackney, we'll give you a lift home.
You haven't got a car.
Driving back,
No, but you know what I'm saying.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what is quality?
I mean,
of life?
there's people so distressed and mad out on the street that no one's looking after.
Yeah.
That is not a quality of life, and yet we're one of the richest countries. But I think you have to define quality of life because business. I'm interested in business very much.
Yeah.
I think business is really interesting because you take it out of politics, and there's so many different models of business, so many entrepreneurs, small, this, that, and the other. Yeah, when you talk about quality of life, there's only the Western quality of life. There's only.
What do you mean by quality?
Yeah, exactly. Let's think about.
Quality?
There's plenty of beautiful models of quality of life. I mean, I've lived in different places. There's better qualities of life that could be enhanced by technology. They wouldn't be adding to. They'd be making better use of the environment with technology. You know, and so you don't want to follow the American or the Western way. You've got to find other ways.
Quality of life. Let me just get a final thought from Jasmine before you go.
I just wanted to say sometimes we just need to take a step back and take a look at it from other people's views.
Okay, so have a look at what other people are saying and maybe we can learn from that's very definitely the Talkaoke People Speak way. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Okay, so we're talking about quality. What is actually quality of life? And is it, do we have a quality of life here? Does everyone in this country have a quality of life?
I was going to say two things. That the first thing was when you said, I think you just said Middle East. Where specifically were you like implying to? Because there's like a huge difference in different countries that have different. Oh, okay. Okay, well. I kind of like I was just like I haven't had enough time to think about that.
Think of a different country?
I don't know. Like I was just like because it depends on like kind of different.
I mean, what do you think about this question about quality? And what is actually quality of
But
life?
then my other point was going to be, and I might be speaking completely, I'm not a geologist, so I might be speaking completely out of turn, but then kind of comparing oil to mining. So my understanding is that mining will always have to happen in that like it's quite a dirty industry that we don't like to think about, and like we kind of pair it with oil, but actually oil we're kind of moving towards trying to almost remove it and find alternatives. But in order to have renewable energy we need mining, because mining we get kind of metals and that's our source for like all the electricity. Yeah, and we're starting to even look at like mining on the moon to try because it's but anyway.
No, I think it's fair enough.
But so like kind of this pairing, that was just in response to that.
They are definitely completely different industries and they do serve completely different purposes. I mean, you're right, in the oil industry we are looking at better alternatives. Mining, again, it is something that has to happen, but a lot of the stuff that we mine for, we could get through reusing stuff, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I mean, to develop some of the reusable technologies that are in use to generate energy, you need some like rare earth metals and things like that. You need them. I mean, and that's okay. You know, that's the thing. They do exist already. Like we could get them through reusing stuff. I think that's one of the things that really should be explored a bit more. So.
Okay, so where do we want to go? Do we want to talk about mining? Do we want to talk about quality of life? Do we want to talk about sustainability? Do we want to talk about this question about are we getting sucked back into some right-wing vortex? Where do we want to go? I'm just going to give it to Emmett.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention this thing about quality of life because Bhutan said they weren't going to measure gross domestic product, or gross national product, they're going to measure gross national happiness. I don't know if any other countries have followed them yet because basically it's autocratic rule there, so the ruler can decide what happens. Most places, they're short time of the political cycle, people always they think if you have these kind of long-term visions, you won't be allowed in. We saw Jeremy Corbyn being roundly rejected by the voters for his ideas for sort of living sustainably in the longer term. I don't know. The other thing is about this. You mentioned about the oil and you wouldn't think we would need to exploit fossil fuels because we've got our local nuclear fusion reactor. We're at the Goldilocks place, perfect distance away from that. We're bathed in energy all the time. So when plants, obviously evolved over many millions and billions of years, trap a small amount of that, and they've been trapping so much of it over time. They're basically putting energy in the bank, energy in the bank, energy in the bank. That's what the fossil fuels are. What it means is actually the size of the biosphere now is a tiny, tiny percentage of the size it used to be when the primordial soup. There was so much more carbon dioxide around then, much more, but it meant that complex life couldn't evolve. So actually, it was a very scarcity of carbon that allowed complex life to evolve. Now complex life has evolved, we're increasing the size of the biosphere, which means ultimately, if we keep on exploiting those fossil fuel resources at a much slower rate than we have been doing, so much slower rate of change, so natural selection can keep up with us, we will actually have an enormous biosphere, and Earth, instead of having this tiny, thin couple of meters below the sea level and above sea level, where we have the biosphere, we can have a hairy ball theorem. We can have a biosphere that goes out hundreds and thousands of miles into the above the current sea level, and then we'll have plenty of water. The sea levels will be much, much lower because it will all be brought up in all the plants. We'll have bamboo growing up many, many miles into the sky.
We're back to the bamboo again, and maybe being bamboozled by science as well. So you've got a vision of this increased biosphere, and I guess a better quality of life. What does that mean? I don't know. You've hit me with two completely different points. What? Yeah.
Humans. We always talk about quality of life in terms of humans.
Okay. Yeah. What about quality of the
What
rest of life?
about quality of nature, quality of the environment?
Okay.
If you talk about from the humans, they're only going to ever see it one way.
Okay. So the humans have got particular perspectives. I'll come to you in a second.
That's all right. I was going to make the point that what quality of life isn't is just economic growth. And it does seem to me that until relatively recently, economic growth was the thing that all governments went for, full stop. And in a funny sort of way, it's interesting that Boris Johnson's government, when faced with choices between economic growth and satisfying populism, have actually chosen populism and popularity over economic growth, which is bad in its own right, but in a funny sort of way indicates a potential sort of opportunity that the agenda is no longer constrained to economic growth.
Just ask you, because you look like a scientist.
Yeah.
Are there any scientists studying quality of life, and what kind of scientists would study quality of life?
Well, there are economists and economists and psychologists are studying it. I mean, it's not my field, but I know that is done.
Minor point to that is just like what economic growth did they put aside for the populace, because I don't think everybody's going to suffer in the same way economically after Brexit, because there are companies that have put nest eggs in place, so they've mitigated a lot of their losses. So I think the people who are making a lot of decisions and donating to the parties that make these decisions don't necessarily have the same weight to lose as everybody else. And a kind of technical point on renewable energies and things like that, putting it in the bank is what we're struggling with. We have to massively figure out how to run over variability in the solar power, because so I'm from Scotland, we have a lot of wind energy, but sometimes it's just too windy to even run the windmills, which is kind of stupid. But it's also keeping the energy in a way that's, one, not lossy to keep it there, and then fast enough that you can meet demand as and when demand happens. That's the part of renewables that's really difficult right now, because they're developing massively new ways to capture the energy, but we don't have enough. The technology for the storage is our main kind of issue right now, which needs rare earth metals. It's a bit of a self-defeating cycle, I guess. But
Lucy?
Oh, I was going to say, on the note of quality of life for things that aren't humans, I guess it's just looking at our waste systems, and I think this is something that everyone's kind of maybe heard of, but kind of if you look at endocrine disruptors and hormones that are in the environment and drugs that are in the environment. Like I think they took an insect out of a river in Surrey, and it had like the amount of cocaine that someone would do.
Was it talking a lot?
It could have been a bit jittery, I don't know. But it had like cocaine, it had like loads of estrogen, it like was like, that would be like the same level that you would give to a human, which is just like, it's interesting to just think of different metrics when we're like looking at quality of life and we need to consider ourselves within an ecosystem and be measuring everything.
I can give you the mic to you, Helena, but we're actually reaching the end of the evening now, so I'm going to try to go on with some final thoughts here. I'm give you your point.
I know it was a question, actually. It shouldn't have been a question. Like, yeah, it was just a question. Like, you say this thing about estrogen. Is it true that there's, like, in the drinking water in, like, kind of cities, there is a really high level of estrogen? Like, in the drinking water, which means that, like, people are consuming estrogen when they, I don't know. That's what I've heard. Is that true?
Is it from contraceptive pill and stuff and getting into the water and...
So, but if you wanted to avoid this estrogen, what would you actually do? I mean, could you just drink bottled water? Is that what you should be doing?
Bottle up though. So actually you're drinking estrogen.
It's found that male fish started to develop female gonads and stuff. And yeah, because of all the estrogen in the water.
Is that why the sperm count's gone down for men in the Western world? Yeah, it's gone down drastically, yeah.
So we're also evolving. We're also evolving as a that may well be because of the estrogen, but we are evolving as evolution doesn't stop, and so like people are being born without wisdom teeth, and like things are constantly changing to do with the world that we're living in. Yeah. So we're still evolving, and things are changing.
Is that down to fluoride in the water, so they don't have to lose?
We put fluoride in the water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that
not here in the US, and then there was like a huge increase in beneficial to oral health.
Okay, well, I mean, what with that public health agenda going, we haven't really got time for new subjects, but it's now we need this time to encapsulate. We need to, I mean, we're actually not driving the van back to Hackney because we're leaving it here because we're doing a training session at the Natural History Museum on Monday. If you want to learn how to do this job and you work for the Natural History Museum, speak to Christina. But we need to, when we get on the tube, we need to go on the tube with a sense that we've come to some kind of conclusion, we've come somewhere. So we need...
Why?
Just so that I can go...
Because you want to do that.
Me,
that makes
yes.
you feel better.
Exactly.
I hate conclusions. Okay, I like open doors and let me think a bit for a while.
With a question there.
Conclusion, okay. The thing is, in London we have a very particular instance with the water because the river would have gone dry. So what they do is they pump out the water downstream of London for drinking water and things, and then they pump the wastewater in upstream of London. So there's lots of river, which is the reason we're recycling. Normally, if water gets recycled through the atmospheric meteorological system, it takes out all the hormones and things. But through the processes we have with filtration, it doesn't actually remove things like HRT and contraceptive pill and all that kind of thing. But it could help, but in reality, a lot of people don't always be drinking the water from within that London ring main system. But all the cities in the world, the sperm count is dropping. So it seems much more likely it's just an adaptation because we're living at such high population densities. The only people who are still having enormous families are people who've come from a much more rural environment. And they're everywhere because there's obviously lots of systems that have evolved over millions of years that we've not been aware of, but it may well do. It could be epigenetics. We've got no real understanding of all of these things going on. But when we're living at very high population densities, family size is dropping everywhere in the world where people are living in urban environments.
Tell him about Stamford Hill. Well, they're all city dwellers. And the Hasidic Jewish community has, there's nothing happening up there. They're getting bigger and bigger, the families. It doesn't mean when you move into a town, you suddenly...
Okay, I mean, also there's a question of, does the low sperm count actually lead to less children?
Low sperm counts, have they?
They may well do, I don't know. Anyway, this is another discussion. Let's get final thoughts.
Sperm count and fertility are different. You can have a low sperm count and still be really fertile and have a ton of kids. Like, you produce far too much.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting final thoughts now. This is a whole new subject. I want to get final thoughts. Because I want to go home, as I said, with that.
You can go home on lack of final thoughts. Does that not make you feel comfortable?
I'm going to at least attempt to get them. So maybe not from you, maybe a question, opening question, maybe from you as well. We've got a new face to table. What's your name?
I missed the beginning of it.
We've missed the entire.
I know, but it looked really interesting.
I mean, basically, we started off talking about. What did we start off talking about?
Climate change and
Yeah. Yeah, climate change and reducing populations. We talked about dolphin sex. We talked about. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things we talked about, lots of different views, but we're concluding now. Anyway, let me get a final thought from this person. What's your name again?
Amy.
Amy,
Hello.
what's your final thought?
Just respect the environment, do your bit, and keep putting pressure on the politicians. Keep putting pressure on manufacturing businesses, and just keep harping on about it.
Okay, so keep doing it, keep going.
Yeah, don't give up.
Don't give up. Okay, final thought.
I haven't got. Well, but all I say that it's your world now. I mean, I'm conscious that I'm the older generation, and I see that it's your world, and it's for you to set agendas that are different from the sort of agenda I had when I was your age.
What about, because earlier on the young people were talking about getting rid of everybody over 60, just combusting them.
That's not a particularly good idea.
So are you happy to let them
No, yeah.
My society, where I come from, you're the elder. You've got a lot to offer. You don't just hand down. But to me, that is just. No, not cop out. I'm just saying to you.
It is. I mean, really, you see that every new generation that comes along, their agendas are different. What they care about is different. Their energies are different. Everything's about it's different, and that's a sort of wonderful thing about how society evolved. Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Okay, final thought?
Maybe just that something that you said, it was about, maybe when you've got less, then you can be more engaged despite of all the terrible things that are happening around you. And I think that's quite a good point.
Okay, so sometimes less is more, less stuff and less things to do allows you to be more engaged. Okay, final thought?
I think it's really important, where we spend our money. So, in a world that sees us as, economic assets, where you spend your money really matters. So, if you want to help climate, do you think, spend your money on things that help climate? Be vegan.
Okay.
I would like to have a 4-day or 3-day working week so I can spend more time cooking and being green.
But can't you just do that and earn less money?
Maybe I should experiment. This is it. Maybe I should be the change.
Okay. Final thought?
You'll have to come back to me.
If you want, it can just be a fact about an animal.
Butterflies taste with their feet.
I wouldn't be a very good butterfly because I've got poor taste in footwear.
My final thought. My final thought is I'm gonna say it, and you're not allowed to ask me any questions about it.
Okay.
I think the solution to everything is mirrors in space.
Okay.
I just wish it was less about ethical consumption, more about government setting regulations. So because I'll buy the Tesco ready meal if it's there, but if you ban it, then I can't buy it. So.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I've got one.
Okay. It's too late now. You've done the butterfly. Go on.
Well, I just think it's less on individual actions and more on whole systems and organisational and governmental changes.
Final thought?
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. So basically, it's gonna change only if the society is behind it, the government's behind it. So basically, you have to vote. You have to push for those causes that you want to get in there, and then government will be responsive.
I just think this last year we've been great. We've seen a number of people who got involved in environmental activism through Extinction Rebellion. But Extinction Rebellion is run by fossil fuel companies, and everything they do is the worst possible way of doing it. So instead, use that activism or get involved with Greenpeace instead. Extinction Rebellion's first thing was to attack Greenpeace headquarters. Get involved with Greenpeace. They really know what they're doing. They had that victory in there about the Heathrow the other day.
Okay. There's a lot of words in a very short space of time. Well, final and initial thought?
I think I agree about the whole kind of pushing society as a whole, because humans evolved for convenience, and unless we take that convenience away, we're not going to change.
Okay, so we've got to just push out ourselves. Final question?
Nope.
Nothing? Final thought?
Just that the planet will always be fine after a major mass extinction, so everything will be fine just when we're gone.
Okay, so this is our final swan song, and it's our final swan song tonight. My final thought, no, I think with all of these ideas, I think we've got a fighting chance to survive the mass extinction. Some of us, anyway, some of the younger ones. So that's great. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone, for taking part. And thanks to Rick on camera, who's been dutifully documenting hours and hours of this chat. If you want to see more Talkaoke, come to Oxo Tower tomorrow. We're at the Barge House.